Greetings, everybody. This is going to be the last lecture or slideshow on muscles. This is quick. It's going to be fast. I want to get through a summary of muscles. The three types of muscles, where they're found, what they're like, how they contract, how they relax, their purpose, their function, in a very brief video presentation here. These are taken from two tables in your textbook, Chapter 10, Table 10.1 and Table 10.2. But we're going to start in reverse order. So Table 10.2 is first. So I'm going to try to bring up Table 10.2. There we go. Table 10.2. This is a great summary. Look at this. The three kinds of muscles: skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Those are the three kinds of muscles. This gets into similarities and differences of those. The first difference between these muscles is skeletal muscle is voluntary. You get to choose when to contract your skeletal muscle. For the most part, unless somebody surprises you, and then you jump. But that we consider that voluntary anyway. Whereas your heart, you don't get to choose whether your heart pumps or doesn't pump. It pumps. And smooth muscle lines the intestinal walls and is attached to the muscles on the of your skin that make the erector pili muscle that makes your hair follicles stand up, movements of the iris and the ciliary body inside your eye. So all of these are involuntary. You don't get to choose. They happen. So that's a big difference. Voluntary, skeletal, involuntary, cardiac, involuntary, smooth muscle. The coverings, the connective tissue coverings of these. Skeletal muscle has epimysium, paramysium, endomysium. We've been through that. You can see that in other slides. You can see it repictured here in this graphic. Whereas cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, has endomysium only in each one of those. Now you can see striations also in skeletal muscle, and you'll see striations in cardiac muscle. So visually, there are striations, whereas in smooth muscle, there are not striations. This is not a striated muscle. These cells are connected with desmosomes. So they're tight connections. So when one muscle contracts, it contracts another muscle. They assist each other in contracting the whole group of muscles all at once in an involuntary fashion. All right, so now we're going to go, this table 10.2 takes up an entire page of your text. So I'm going to go to the second page of the slide, which is really just one big table in your textbook. So remember, top part here, this is still skeletal muscle up here. Skeletal is there. Cardiac is here. Smooth muscle is here. We continue in the same columns. So cell shape and appearance, striated. Skeletal muscle is striated. Long cylindrical fibers. Remember, multiple nuclei. Striated, and there are T tubules. All right. Cardiac muscle is medium sized. It's not quite as long. You're going to get shorter segments of cells, and they are connected together with these things that are called intercalated discs. Extremely important in cardiac muscle. That's what transfers the electrical activity from one cardiac muscle cell to the next cardiac muscle cell. Intercalated discs. And this is an intercalated disc right there, that little thing. And that little thing there. That means that's a connection point between one cardiac muscle cell and the next cardiac muscle cell. That passes on the voltage that allows these cells to contract as a unit. That's what you want your heart to do. Down here in smooth muscles, you have overlapping small, what are called fusiform cells. Fusiform is that shape, right? It's skinny at one end, bigger in the middle, skinny at the other end. That's called a fusiform shape. You can think of it as a football shape if you like. So that's fusiform. That's what that means. They are single cells. They are not connected together. They're not multinucleated. Centrally located nucleus, not striated. Okay? Not striated. All right. Calcium source. Where does the calcium come from? Of course, you know, in sarcoplasmic reticulum inside skeletal muscle. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is not as well developed in cardiac muscle, but most of the calcium comes from the interstitial fluid. All right. And sarcoplasmic reticulum in smooth muscle is not at all well developed. Most of the calcium is from the interstitial fluid. That means that means the fluid surrounding the cell. So the cell brings the calcium in when it needs it to contract. Contractile unit and calcium binding. Remember the sarcomere. You know, calcium binds to troponin and all the rest. Here, it's a very similar structure function. Cardiac muscle does the same thing. It has sarcomeres. Calcium binds to troponin. So you get the same kind of interaction between actin and myosin, a very similar kind of contraction style. Smooth muscle does not work that way. There are no sarcomeres. Calcium binds to calmodulin. We didn't get into the specifics of that. That's fine. It doesn't matter that you know that. The calcium binds to calmodulin, which which allows actin and myosin to interact with each other, but not in sarcomeres. So it's a very different, it's a similar kind of activity, but it doesn't have the arrangement that skeletal muscle has. Stimulation. Stimulation is nerve control. Nerve control is voluntary. That's why it's called voluntary muscle. Right? You remember, the axon terminal ends at the sarcolemma. Acetylcholine is the excitatory neurotransmitter for skeletal muscle. We consider cardiac muscle what is called autorhythmic. It has a pacemaker, but it's still a nerve. The pacemaker is a bundle of nerves which send out an electrical signal to make the cardiac muscle contract. All right? There is some control of the nervous system involuntarily through the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system can slow your heart down or speed your heart up. And so we consider that excitatory or inhibitory. It can do either. It can slow it down or speed it up, depending on what you need. And then smooth muscle, multi-unit smooth muscle. You know, smooth muscle comes in two different varieties here. Don't fret over this. I'm not going to get into that in the test very deep. Not this at all. Not the multi-unit and the single unit. Just understand that the autonomic nervous system also controls smooth muscle contraction or relaxation. All right, the rate of response, primary energy source. We got three different kinds of muscle, and we didn't get into that, but we are going to get into that in this presentation. So that'll be the next table. All right, so you have three kinds of skeletal muscle that you can contract voluntarily. Right? You have what is called slow oxidative, you have fast oxidative, and you have fast glycolytic. We're going to get into the specifics of that in the next slide. Heart, suffice to say, you have slow oxidative slow oxidative cardiac muscle. Why is that? Because it needs to contract continuously forever. It cannot not contract. And so it has to be able, has a very good blood supply. It has to be able to get its energy from aerobic production. Remember, anaerobic production of ATP. You don't get much ATP, you're not going to get a good fuel supply. You've got to have a consistent fuel supply. Lots of blood flow and aerobic production of ATP for cardiac muscle. All right. Now, also smooth muscle also has contracts for very slow and long durations. So when you're digesting food, think of that. It takes hours for food to get through your the intestines, and that's all done. The movement of that is all done by smooth muscle, which slowly contracts. So good blood supply again, aerobic production of ATP. You need constant sources of ATP for this long, slow, smooth muscle contraction. This is an interesting difference here. Tissue repairability is very limited in skeletal muscle. You think, well, no, it can repair. Yes, it can repair. But if you get significant injuries to any of your skeletal muscles of your body, it's the amount of return of function that you're going to get is more and more limited depending on the degree of injury. Same thing with cardiac muscle. If you close off the blood supply to some part of your heart, that part of the heart dies. Those muscle fibers, yes, they actually die, and they do not get replaced. The rest of the heart has to make up the difference. So we consider that a limited tissue repairability, whereas Smooth muscle has a tremendous ability to repair itself. If you get some sort of internal injury into your intestines, which of course would be bad, you have surgery, whatever, you survive all that, those muscles will repair to a great degree, and the function of those muscles will return. And that's a wonderful thing about smooth muscles. You wish you had that in cardiac muscles too, but that's the way it is. All right, last slide here. I told you that skeletal muscles, this is only applying to skeletal muscle. Remember that, only skeletal muscle here. We have 3 kinds of fiber types that we distinguish in skeletal muscle. We have what are known as slow oxidative, fast oxidative, and fast glycolytic. Now what you need to think of is energy sources. Energy, how do these fibers get their energy? And what are these muscle fibers supposed to be doing? What do they do for you? Well, if it's slow oxidative, that means it's going to be involved in things that take a long time. So I bring you right down here. What's a function of a slow oxidative? Maintaining posture. So you can stand up for hours, but you cannot hold your arm out to your side for hours. And we're going to get into the distinction why. So maintaining posture or marathon running. If I'm going to run a long distance, I need a lot of slow oxidative fibers. Now, the trouble here is that you get what you get. You're born with what you have. The distribution of slow oxidative versus fast oxidative versus fast glycolytic, what you have at birth is what you get. There is some ability to change muscle fiber types, but it's extremely rare. It's very difficult to do. For the most part, for our purposes, when you're born, those are the distribution of muscle fiber types that you have forever. So ATP use, slow oxidative, you can imagine, it's slow, right? It does need a consistent supply of ATP, but it doesn't go through a ton of ATP in a short amount of time. It's very, very judicious with the use of ATP. Whereas fast oxidative goes through ATP fast, fast glycolytic goes through it fast. Okay, let's keep on going. Capacity to make ATP. Well, of course, if you need a lot of ATP, but you're going to use it in a slow fashion, you just need a big water tower full of ATP. So you have a high ability to make ATP, you store that ATP, and you can keep on going. So you can stand up for hours. You can keep yourself upright for hours. That's what those muscles are for, right? Fast oxidative, though, they have a moderate ability to make ATP. Let's go over here to fast glycolytic, a very limited ability to make ATP. These muscles, fast glycolytics, are going to be very fast, very quick, very strong. One repetition. If you're going to sprint for 5 seconds, you're going to use fast glycolytics. If you're going to lift a heavy weight, or you're going to lift a box full of books, you want as many fast glycolytic fibers, muscle fibers, skeletal muscle fibers as you can have, because they're going to allow you great strength for a very short amount of time. And fast oxidative are somewhere in the middle. We used to call the slow oxidative red muscle or red fibers, and we used to call the fast and the fast glycolytics over here white fibers. We don't call them that anymore. We used to call them that because of their blood supply, right? Slow oxidative have a very good blood supply, and so they appear to be red. And fast oxidative and fast glycolytics appear to be white because they have a lesser blood supply. Right, so here it is, concentration of capillaries, right? And that is your supply of blood. If the capillaries are extensive, the muscle is going to appear to be red in color. If it's sparse, as in over here in the fast glycolytic, it's going to appear to be white. And moderately extensive, of course, the concentration of capillaries, these are going to appear to be somewhere between a red and a white fiber. Color of the fibers, there we go, right? Colors red, lighter red, white. And that's all dependent on blood supply. Contraction velocity, as you might guess, slow oxidative contract slow. They can sustain a long contraction, they can hang on to it, but they're fairly slow about their contractions. As you can imagine, fast glycolytics are going to contract fast, and fast oxidatives contract fast as well. So think of slow, long endurance things with slow oxidative. And with the fast fibers, think of short duration, quick action, high strength, high speed. Resistance to fatigue, of course, slow oxidatives, they're going to not fatigue for a long, long time. Whereas the fast glycolytics are going to fatigue very rapidly. You're going to get a few repetitions, maybe 5 seconds of all-out strength, and then they're done. They're done. They have to rest. They have to recover. And fast oxidatives are going to be somewhere in between. Mitochondria, of course, as you would imagine, slow oxidatives have many mitochondria. And fast glycolytics have very few mitochondria. And then fast oxidatives are somewhere in the middle, usually. They would have fewer than the red fibers, but more than their fast glycolytic companions. Amount of myoglobin, remember myoglobin carries extra oxygen. That's an extra source of oxygen. Not the main source of oxygen, but extra. Of course, if you're going to generate a lot of ATP, you need a lot of oxygen. You need extra supplies of oxygen. You're going to get that from myoglobin, so they have a lot of slow oxidatives have a large supply of myoglobin. As you would expect, fast oxidatives have a medium supply of myoglobin, and fast glycolytics have almost no myoglobin. There you go. Primary function, long distance, long endurance activities, whatever that is. Let's go right down to fast glycolytics. Short duration, intense movements, maximum strength. Sprinting, lifting weights, lifting a heavy box from the floor to the counter. The more fast glycolytics you have, the easier that's going to be because you will feel stronger. And this is where they're found. Red fibers, the slow oxidatives, are found in the trunk and lower limbs. As you would expect, maintaining posture and marathon running. Fast glycolytics, where you're going to find those, I'm just going over the other side. Short duration, intense movements, upper limb muscles, typically. That's why you can stand up for an hour, but you cannot hold your arm out to your side for an hour, even with no weight on it. Go ahead and try it. And then lower limb muscles are also going to have fast oxidatives because you can sprint for a distance, you can work hard for a short amount of time, and those lower limb muscles will provide that kind of power. Whereas upper limb muscles tend to be used much more sporadically. You use them for certain activities, intense activities, and then they rest. All right, that's it. We're done with this very, very quick summary. Look over these two tables, table 10.1, 10.2, in the McKinley textbook, or just look at them here on this slideshow. That covers most of the basis of the three kinds of muscles, and then the specific kinds of skeletal muscles that you will find, where you find them, and their attributes. You should learn these things. I guarantee you there will be some test questions about this stuff. That is all.